Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Quote of the day: a goal without a plan is just a wish. Today, the topic of my presentation is Sustainable Development Goals. Learning outline of my presentation is introduction about SDGs, what is SDGs, recent update, and MCQs. At the end of this presentation, participants will be able to describe about Sustainable Development Goals. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. At its heart are the 17 SDGs, which are an urgent call for action by all countries developed and developing in a global partnership. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivation must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequalities, and super economic growth. These are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are discussed one by one in this presentation. Though the goals are broad and interdependent, 2 years later, the SDGs were made more actionable by a United Nations resolution adopted by the General Assembly. The resolution identifies specific targets for each goal, along with indicators that are being used to measure progress towards each target. The year by which the target is meant to be achieved is usually between 2020 and 2030. To facilitate monitoring, a variety of tools exist to track and visualize progress towards the goal. All intention is to make data more available and easily understood. All members unite together for their common future. There are targets and indicators of each Sustainable Development Goals. The list of targets and indicators for each of the 17 SDGs was published in a UN resolution. Each goal typically has 8 to 12 targets, and each target has between 1 to 4 indicators used to measure progress towards reaching the target. The targets are either outcome targets or means of implementation targets. The number one SDG goals is end poverty in all its forms everywhere. 4 targets and indicators of this goal. By 2030, number one target, by 2030, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living on less than $1.25 per a day. By 2030, reduce at least by half the proportion of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions according to national definition. 1.3 target, implement nationally appropriate social protection system and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030 achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. By 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land and other forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate technology, and financial services. Global progress of this SDG 1 till now, the slowdown in progress on poverty reduction since 2015 has been further set back by COVID-19 pandemic, with the global rate of extreme poverty rising in 2020 for the first time in over 20 years. COVID-19 has led to the first rise in extreme poverty in a generation. Global poverty rate is projected to be 7% in 2030. An additional 119 to 124 million people were pushed back into extreme poverty in 2020. SDG number 2, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Targets and indicators of SDG 2 by 2030, end hunger and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including infants, to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food all year around. By 2030, end all forms of malnutrition, including achieving by 2025 the internationally agreed target on stunting and wasting in children under 5 years of age, and address the nutritional needs of adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women, and older persons. By 2030, double the agricultural productivity and income of small-scale food producers, in particular women, indigenous people, family farmers, pastorers, and fisheries, including through secure and equal access to land, other productive resources and inputs, knowledge, financial services, market, and opportunities for value addition and non-farm employment. By 2030, ensure sustainable food production system and implement resilient agriculture practice that increase productivity and production, that maintain ecosystem, strengthen the capacity to change according to a climate, extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other disaster, and that progressively improve land and soil quality. By 2020, maintain the genetic diversity of seed, cultivated plants, and farmed and domestic animals and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at the national, regional, and international level, and promote access to and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge as internationally agreed. Now comes the global progress of this goal. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of people experiencing hunger globally and suffering from food insecurity had been rising gradually since 2014. The pandemic has increased the vulnerabilities and inadequacies of global food system, potentially leaving hundreds of millions more people chronically undernourished and making the goal of ending hunger more difficult to achieve. The global pandemic is exacerbating world hunger worldwide, and additional 70 to 161 million people are likely to have experienced hunger as a result of the pandemic in 2020. Pandemic will also worsen the child malnutrition. 22% of children under 5 years are stunted. 6.7 of children under 5 suffer from wasting, and 5.7% of children under 5 are overweight. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. By 2030, reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70 per thousand live births. By 2030, a preventable death of newborn and children under 5 years of age, with all countries aiming to reduce neonatal mortality at least as low as 12 per thousand live birth, and under 5 mortality at least 25 per thousand live birth. By 2030, epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and neglected tropic disease, and combat hepatitis, waterborne, and other communicable diseases. By 2030, reduce one-third premature mortality from non-communicable diseases through prevention and treatment, and promote mental health and well-being of the child. Strengthen the prevention and treatment of substance abuse, including narcotic drug abuse. By 2030, halve the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. By 2030, ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, including family planning, information and education, and integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs. Achieve universal health coverage, including financial risk protection, access to quality essential healthcare services, and access to safe, effective, quality, and affordable medicine and vaccines for all. By 2030, substantially reduce the number of death and illness from hazardous chemical, air, water, and soil pollution and contamination. Now comes the global progress of SDG number 3. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, progress had been made in many health areas, including improving the health of mother, children, increasing immunization coverage, and reducing the incidence of communicable disease, albeit not fast enough to meet the goal 3 targets by 2030. The disruption caused by pandemic has now halted progress and even reversed some gain made. According to a recent survey, substantial disruption persists more than a year into the pandemic, with about 90% of countries and territories still reporting one or more disruption to essential health services. The pandemic has halted or reversed progress in health and shortened life expectancy. A decade of progress in reproductive health, maternal health, and child health could be still on reversed by COVID-19. SDG number 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. There are 7 targets of the SDG number 4. Complete free primary and secondary school for all, access to early childhood education and care, affordable quality technical, vocational, tertiary and university, skills for employment and entrepreneurship, eliminate gender disparities and equal access, ensure all youth and most adults have numeracy and literacy, knowledge and skills for sustainable development. SDG number 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. But the women equal participation in decision making is crucial for COVID-19 response and recovery. Women represent 25.6% in national parliaments, 36.3% in local government, and 28.2% in managerial positions, and violence against women persists as unexpectedly high levels and is intensified by the pandemic. 1 in 3 women have been subjected to physically and sexually violence at least once of their lifetime since the age of 15, and 10 million girls will be at risk of child marriages. SDG number 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Targets of SDG number 6, by 2030 achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. By 2030 achieve access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all. Open defecation, paying special attention to the needs of women and girls and those in vulnerable situation. By 2030, improve water quality by reduction pollution, eliminating dumping and minimize release of hazardous chemical and materials having the proportion of untreated wastewater, and substantially increasing recycling and safe reuse globally. By 2030, substantially increase water use efficiency across all sectors and ensure sustainable withdrawals and supply of fresh water to address water scarcity, and substantially reduce the number of people suffering from water scarcity. By 2030, implement integrated water resources management at all levels, including through transboundary cooperation as appropriate. By 2020, protect and restore water-related ecosystem, including mountain, forest, wetlands, river, aquifers, and lakes. But the stats shows billions of people still lack access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. In 2020, 26% of people lack safely managed drinking water, 46% lack safely managed sanitation, and 29% lack basic hygiene. 2.3 billion people live in water-stressed countries. Between 1970 and 2015, natural wetlands shrank by 35%. 129 countries are not on track to have sustainably managed water resources by 2030. Billions of people worldwide still live without safety managed drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene service, which are critical for protecting human health and containing the spread of COVID-19 virus. Over the past century, global water use has increased at more than twice the rate of population growth. In addition to water stress, countries and territories are facing growing challenges linked to water pollution, degraded water-related ecosystem, water scarcity caused by climate change and lack of cooperation on transboundary water. The world is not on track to achieve Goal 6. SDG number 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. By 2030, ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. By 2030, increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. By 2030, double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. SDG number 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Global economic growth was slowed down 2.2% per capita growth in 2010 and 2018, but 1.5% GDP per capita growth in 2019 due to the pandemic COVID-19. The world faced the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. GDP per capita expected to decline by 4.2% in 2020. During pandemic, 1.6 billion workers in informal economy risk losing and their livelihood. Tourism is facing unpredicted challenges. SDG number 8, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. These are the targets of SDG number 8. Number 1, develop sustainable resilience and inclusive infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, increase access to financial service and market, upgrade all industries and infrastructure for sustainability, enhance research and upgrade industrial technologies, facilitate sustainable infrastructure development for developing countries, support domestic technology development and industrial diversification, universal access to information and communication and technology. SDG number 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. These are the targets of SDG number 10, reduce income inequalities, promote universal social, economic, and political inclusion, ensure equal opportunities and discrimination, adopt fiscal and social policies that promote equality, improve regulation of global financial market and institution, enhance representation for developing countries in financial institute, response and well-managed migration policies, special and differential treatment for developing countries, encourage development assistance and investment at least developed countries, reduce transaction costs for migrant and remittance. Reverse progress made in reducing income since the financial crisis. COVID-19 estimated to increase the average Gini for emerging market and developing countries by 6%. What is the Gini index? The Gini index basically measure income inequalities and range from 0 to 100, where 0 indicates that income is shared equally among all peoples and 100 indicates that one person accounts for all income. The proportion of the global population who are refugees has more than doubled since 2020. For every 1 lakh person, 311 are refugees. SDG number 11, make cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Safe and affordable housing, affordable and sustainable transport system, inclusive and sustainable urbanization, protect the world's culture and natural heritage, reduce the adverse effect of natural disaster, reduce the environmental impact of cities, provide access to safe and inclusive green and public spaces, strong national and regional developing planning, implement policies for inclusion, resources efficiency, and disaster risk reduction, support at least developed countries in sustainable and decent buildings. SDG number 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production pattern. Responsible consumption and production. The global material footprint is rapidly growing, outpacing population and economic growth. In developing countries, use 1/5 of natural resources to produce the same amount of economic output as developed countries. SDG number 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. Strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries. Integrate climate change measures into national policies, strategies, and planning. Improve education awareness, raising human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warning. Atmospheric concentration of the major greenhouse gases continue to increase despite the temporary reduction in emission in 2020 related to measures taken in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The 6 years from 2015 to 2020 are likely to be the warmest on record. Climate change is making the achievement of many goals less likely. To limit global warming to 1.5 degree above pre-industrial level in accordance with the Paris Agreement, the world would need to achieve net zero carbon dioxide emission by around 2050. As of April 2021, 18 countries and territories had reported the development and adoption of national or local disaster risk reduction strategies on increase from 48 countries and territories in the first year of Sendai framework. The climate crisis continues largely unabated. 2020 global average temperature at 1.2 degree above pre-industrial baseline and forcefully off track to stay or below 1.5 degrees centigrade as called for in the Paris Agreement. Rising greenhouse gas emission and require shifting economy towards carbon neutrality. SDG number 14, life below water. By 2025, prevent and significantly reduce marine pollution of all kinds. By 2020, sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystem to avoid significant adverse impact, minimize and address the impact of ocean acidification, including through enhanced scientific cooperation of all levels, effectively regulate harvesting and overfishing, illegally, unreported and unregulated fishing and destructive fishing practices. By 2020, conserve at least 10% of coastal and marine areas, prohibit contain from fisheries subsides which contributes to overcapacity and overfishing, eliminate subsides that contribute to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. By 2030, increase the economic benefits to small island developing states and at least developed countries from the sustainable use of marine resources. The substantially of our ocean is under severe threat due to plastic and marine population, increased ocean warming, eutrophication, acidification, and fishery collapse. Dead zones are rising at an alarming rate from 400 in 2008 to 700 in 2019. Dead zone basically is the area of water that lacks sufficient oxygen to support marine life. SDG number 15, life on land. And these all are the targets of SDG number 15. Mobilize financial resource for biodiversity, mobilize resources for forest management, combat trafficking of protected species, ensure conservation ecosystem and services, promote sustainable management forest, achieve and degradation neutrality, ensure conservation of mountain ecosystem, reduce degradation of natural habitats. 15.6 ensure fair sharing benefits genetic resources. 15.7 end trafficking of protected species, reduce impact invasive alien species, integration ecosystem biodiversity values. SDG number 16, peace and justice. And these all are the targets of goal number 16, reduce violence, non-discriminatory laws, violence against children, justice for all, illicit financial and arms flow, corruption and bribery, effective institution, inclusive decision-making, inclusive global governance, legal identity, public access to information, violence, terrorism, and crime. And in the last, there is a 17 number goal, which is very important, Sustainable Development Goal 17, partnership for the goals. If you want to achieve all these SDGs, it cannot be done by a single organization or a government alone. Partnership are an essential dimension to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Now it's time for recent updates. In 2018, the government of Pakistan and the United Nations in Pakistan signed the UN Sustainable Development Framework, also known as the Pakistan One United Nations Program 2018 and 2022. Pakistan future faces many hurdles and its progress towards the Sustainable Development Goal is stagnating unless there is a major shift in approach. The countries face a difficult future. Pakistan ranked 129 out of 165 countries in a recent Sustainable Development Goal Index ranking with an overall score of 57.7%, mainly for its progress in one of the 17 goals, which is climate action. MCQs time. Number 1 MCQs in SDGs 10 have highlight about the reduced inequalities, in which index the income inequalities are measured. Gini index, gross domestic product, per capita income, journal sale tax.
A.
A is the right answer. Gini index. The life of a marine animals is very much important and oxygen is necessary. The place where oxygen is not exchanged properly are known as fresh zone, dead zone, sunlight zone, twilight zone.
B.
Dead zone B is the right answer. There are many indicators and target of SDGs. Which one of the following is not the principle of Sustainable Development Goal? Maximum use of natural resources, respect and care for all forms of life, change in personal attitude and practice towards environment, improvement in the quality of life.
A.
A is the right answer. Maximum use of natural resources. World is facing global warming which disturb human life very much. Which agreement is used for the reduction of global warming? Paris Agreement, Montreal Agreement, International Climate Change Plan, United Nations Plan of Action.
A.
Paris Agreement A is the right answer. Which of the following statement best explain the concept of sustainable development? Use of natural resources minimally, use of natural resources for over benefit, use of natural resources judicially so that they are available for future generation, preserve over natural resources for over future generation.
C.
C is the right answer. This statement best explains the concept of SDGs. With reference to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, which of the following is SDG number 10? Zero hunger, climate change, decent work and economic growth, reduce inequalities.
C.
D is the right answer, reduce inequalities. C is goal number 8. The discussion on SDGs was started after submitting a report on environment to the United Nations in 1987. That report was first report on climate change over common future, second report on climate change, fifth assessment report. B over common future is the right one. Which of the following is not a part of SDG's target to be achieved by 2030? Provide free primary education to all boys and girls, universal access to a quality higher education, equal access to affordable vocational training, free higher education to all.
D.
D is the right answer, free higher education to all. Which of the following is not an SDG's target to be achieved by 2030? Gender equality, zero hunger, good health and well-being, space research.
D.
D.
D, space research is the right one. For successful achievement of SDGs, which dimension is very much necessary? Partnership, policy making, funding, implementation.
A.
Partnership A is the right one. This is the key of my MCQs, references of my presentation, and thank you.